The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank God for this rare opportunity to be able to speak in this House and amplify or give voice to the dreams and aspirations of the people of Marco City. Madam Speaker, our heart goes out to all of the grieving families in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas today. Each weekend, and now beginning Wednesday of each week, we are attending funerals to grieve with families who have lost loved ones. And most especially, Madam Speaker, the grief is thick when someone dies suddenly or tragically or senselessly. And so we pray for all of our families today. Madam Speaker, it is an honor to lend my voice to the debate around the resolution to transfer $17 million to the Disaster Emergency Fund. Let me begin where most Bahamians are already. We live on the front line of climate risk. Hurricanes, storm surges, and coastal and urban flooding are real. These are not abstract threats. They are our lived reality in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I myself, like some others, rode out the hurricane in our homes as we watched it destroyed while we were in it. And I thank God for His grace, His mercy, His sustaining power that has kept so many of us. And we grieve for those that were lost and pray for their families. We saw generational wealth destroyed over the course of a 24-hour period. But our people, Madam Speaker, are resilient. We are every day working back, bouncing back, and still standing. Dorian alone cost us more than $3 billion in damages and losses. Families are still rebuilding. Businesses are still recovering. We cannot pretend that tomorrow will be kinder if we do not prepare today. So yes, we believe in dedicated disaster funding. We know that it is necessary and that it is responsible. It is urgent. But responsible is not the same as writing a blank check. The government asked this House to transfer $17 million into the Disaster Emergency Fund. Before we do that, Madam Speaker, this House must insist on rules, transparency, and tabling a plan that strengthens both response and prevention. My first point, Madam Speaker, is simple. Where are the regulations that govern this fund? The Disaster Risk Management Act created two funds. It did not define how dollars will move in practice. The law uses broad labels: response, recovery, rehabilitation. Those labels are not operational guidance. People need to know what counts, what does not, and who decides. The House should not move a dollar under regulation until regulations are tabled and made public that make the rules plain. Regulation that spells out eligible uses and with measurable categories. Regulations that set drawdown triggers. Regulations that fix thresholds for approvals. Regulations that define procurement and contracting rules. Madam Speaker, other Caribbean governments have done this work. They've codified specific grants, caps tied to property value, and protections to avoid duplicating insurance payouts. We should meet that standard or exceed it. The least, Madam Speaker, the government should have done in the opening and in the second was to show and table the breakdown of how the $17 million will be spent and the specific line items out of which it would be appropriated. Why does it matter? Some may ask. Because we are in a political season. Because confidence is easy to lose and hard to win back. And we know that recent controversies with this government around large public works listings and procurement errors have already shaken public trust. Yes. If the government wants the country to believe that this money will be managed fairly and free of political interference for all the people, then the government must put rules on the table first and table the plan of expenditure. My second point is prevention, Madam Speaker. The Act created a disaster emergency fund and a disaster prevention fund. So we wish to ask the question, does today's resolution only fund one and ignore the others? If that would be the case, Madam Speaker, that would be short-sighted. The evidence is overwhelming. Every dollar invested in mitigation and preparedness saves many times that amount in avoided losses. Madam Speaker, we believe in early warning systems. This is a matter that demands our attention as a country. Flood control and drainage, yet another set of circumstances, Madam Speaker, has been the source of stress, anxiety, and loss, Madam Speaker, of wealth for so many Bahamians. Building code enforcement, Madam Speaker, and retrofits are crucial as well. Hazard mapping must occur, Madam Speaker, and communicated to the population. Community shelters that meet standards, Madam Speaker, are overdue. And while we are happy for the completion, finally, of the shelter in Abaco, Madam Speaker, we know that this country woefully lacks shelters. And it is sad that after a generational hurricane like Dorian, that so few have been constructed. These are not line items to be considered later. These, Madam Speaker, they are really the difference between a near miss and a national tragedy. And so, Madam Speaker, again, we would put the question, are we in a position to, and are we willing to allocate at least 20% of this transfer to the Disaster Preparedness Fund? Would we be prepared to earmark it for mitigation and preparedness in our most vulnerable communities, especially across the Family Islands? Will we publish a simple public dashboard that lists each prevention project, its costs, timeline, and the risk it reduces? My third point, Madam Speaker, deals with the issue of sustainability. Madam Speaker, $17 million is not a strategy, it is a transfer. We are asking about strategy. Where's the plan to replenish the fund? Is there a dedicated line item in the annual budget? Are there other revenue streams, Madam Speaker, to smooth out bad years and build capacity in good years, Madam Speaker? Some countries dedicate a portion of sector levies. Some use parametric insurance and catastrophe bonds to complement budgetary set-asides. I'm not sure, Madam Speaker, I'm not sure whether or not we have had adequate discussions with other countries about best practices so that we could incorporate it in our national strategy. No, I'm not prescribing a single model today. I'm insisting that this House see a plan. If this fund is drained by a single hurricane, for example, if it's drained by a single hurricane season, and we return here again with nothing but another transfer, then we have not learned our lesson. Dorian reveals that in many ways we have not learned our lesson. Now, Madam Speaker, to the crux of public confidence. The government asks us to trust it with $17 million for emergencies. Trust is earned by record, not requested by resolution. The PLP says, trust us. The country replies, with respect, based on what? Madam Speaker, let's review just for a brief moment. Let's review the pattern of behavior. We are told this government is transparent. Then we discover, Madam Speaker, that $10 million was quietly funneled to the Carmichael Village Project Development Company. Madam Speaker, there was no announcement, despite the massive multi-million-dollar PR apparatus. No details, no accountability. It was found where, Madam Speaker, this little-known fact? Not in a press release, but deep in a debt bulletin. Transparency by hide and seek is not transparency. Transparency by hide and seek is not transparency, Madam Speaker. And this $10 million, which we have asked about multiple times in this House, including last week, Madam Speaker, we've asked openly in and out of the House. The government has never once responded to it, Madam Speaker. And this, Madam Speaker, is on the heel of a $20 million loan borrowed by a minister, the then Minister of Housing, who even as a corporate soul did not have the ability to borrow $20 million. That was to be allocated for a housing project. We have argued, Madam Speaker, that you cannot find $20 million in the ground for that project. You cannot find $10 million in the ground for that project, yet there has been no explanation surrounding the $20 million, Madam Speaker. And so as they ask us to trust them on the management and deployment of this $17 million, again, if you've just joined us, we are speaking to their record. We are told that this government is fiscally sound, Madam Speaker. The Prime Minister publicly claimed a $135 million monthly surplus. The government's own budget report showed a $2 million deficit for that very month, Madam Speaker. That's not a rounding error. That's a reality check, Madam Speaker. We are told that this government speaks with precision. The Prime Minister announced $400 million for the Grand Bahama Airport. Later, he said he misspoke, and the amount was $200 million. $200 million, Madam Speaker, is a very large slip of the tongue. Madam Speaker, we are told capital plans are steady and reliable. Then the Deputy Prime Minister announces a $100 million reallocation of Saudi development financing away from Family Island airports to Grand Bahama International Airport. Now, in Grand Bahama, we always welcome more money, Madam Speaker, and that airport has been a disaster for the people, led by disastrous decision by this government. But as he announced the reallocation of those funds from the Family Island to Grand Bahama, we note that replacement funds were promised. And we ask today, from where, from whom, on what terms? Madam Speaker, silence. Some say crickets. It seems the money is always on the way, but it never arrives on paper. Does that remind you of something, Madam Speaker? Does that remind you of when it was said in Grand Bahama by the Deputy Prime Minister when asked about the money for the Grand Lucayan sale, that he says $120 million is in the bank? And the Prime Minister never refuted him. Yet today, persons who work at the Grand Lucaya are put on days, and they are saying with some degree of certainty that the hotel is closing. This is even after, Madam Speaker, 500 persons were invited to a PLP rally called Signing of Heads of Agreement, and they were taken on a tour where they could watch a heavy equipment break a few windows, only to learn, as they say, moments later, the window was repaired, Madam Speaker. Some say they think this a game. We are told we are having a tourism boom, Madam Speaker. The IMF warns that tourism expenditure figures may be overstated by nearly $1 billion, billion with a B, Madam Speaker, $1 billion. That on income, Madam Speaker, and that should have triggered a careful internal review. Instead, we got confident speeches, Madam Speaker, and few details, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I brought the reports just in case there's some concern about the point that I made. The technical assistance report, Madam Speaker, is available for any points of order that may arise. Madam Speaker, we are told budgets are disciplined under this administration. There are so many examples to show that this is not the case, Madam Speaker. Parks and Beaches was given $24 million for the year. In 9 months, Madam Speaker, spending blew past that by roughly $7 million. And then an $11 million Treasury loan appeared. Yet, parks across the country remain in disrepair in a number of communities. Where did the money go, Madam Speaker? He said $11 million in Treasury loan for a non-revenue producing entity, Madam Speaker. How does one pay that back? It's similar, Madam Speaker, to when there are tens of millions of dollars that are raised in PPPs, which are really, Madam Speaker, loans. So the question is, if the thing you have gotten the millions for, you are unable, that thing does not generate revenue. See, a PPP for an airport, definitely, you can see. But if the other things do not generate revenue, how will you make the money to repay the loans whose interest rates we are not familiar with? We don't know what it is, even today, Madam Speaker. So again, we ask, where did the money go in beaches and parks, parks and beaches? We are told, Madam Speaker, that under this administration, procurement is clean. Then a $183 million direct award shows up on the government list. We are told, after the public responded in very loud, I suspect what some would call noise, we are told by this government that it was an administrative error. That must be, Madam Speaker, the mother of all errors, the mother of all typos. We are told lessons are learned, yet a $180 million no-bid award for Elutra roadworks appear. Madam Speaker, again, the estimates suggest that costs may be, again, much different. Now, we, Madam Speaker, we support the paving of roads across the Commonwealth of the Bahamas in Elutra. We have confidence in the companies that we have onshore that carry out these works. That's not the issue. The issue is the government ought to speak accurately about, Madam Speaker, how it deploys funds, the process by which it is allocated. So we don't take issues in fights with contractors. We take issue with a government and a minister of finance that has the responsibility to allocate funds in a transparent manner consistent with the procurement provisions of our law, Madam Speaker. We are told that conflicts are carefully managed by this administration. Then a 21-year lease, Madam Speaker, for moorings in Exuma appears, tied to a senior official's spouse. It was signed in secret and canceled only after public outcry. It could have generated, Madam Speaker, it could have generated more than $1 billion. We were asked to believe that everything was in order, but Madam Speaker, here's the kicker. We believe that this administration fully intends to proceed with that same arrangement, Madam Speaker, because clearly none of the trailers have been moved, the buoys in the water still, and many more are on shore. Madam Speaker, they haven't moved since that time. And so we are very much concerned. Madam Speaker, we were told that the Procurement Act is followed, yet the Prime Minister still has not given the country a full report. This House has not seen the full report that is owed. The law requires openness. The public has not gotten that openness. The government promises compliance. The country gets excuses, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if this was a school report, the comments would read, "Speaks well in class, but homework is missing." That's the pattern, Madam Speaker, of this administration. Big claims, missing documentations, shifting numbers, quiet reallocations, after-the-fact explanations, and when caught, a chorus of misspoke, administrative error, and it will be regularized soon, Madam Speaker. Or the Prime Minister's favorite line, you know the line, I don't even have to say, I could ask you, Madam Speaker, to just say it for us, but let me help. Just wait and see. It's famous lines of our Prime Minister. This is why trust is low, Madam Speaker. This is why rules must come first. This is why sustainability must be shown in advance. Because a government that struggles to state the right numbers, file the right reports, follow the right laws, and avoid the wrong contracts should not ask for a blank check, especially not in a political season. So here's the path, Madam Speaker. First, table the regulations now. Define eligible uses. Set drawdown triggers and thresholds. Require open, competitive procurement. Mandate publication of awards within 60 days. Impose conflict disclosures for all decision makers. Second, establish independent oversight. A small expert board with fixed terms and Family Island representation, quarterly public reports, annual audits by the Auditor General laid before this House, Madam Speaker, cap administrative costs so money goes to people and not to overhead. Third, Madam Speaker, ring-fence prevention. Adopt the 20% minimum for the Disaster Preparedness Fund in this resolution. Start with known flood hotspots, resilient shelter retrofits, enforcement of building codes, and community early warning systems should be implemented. Publish the project list and timelines. Fourth, adopt a 3-year financing plan. Identify revenue sources and risk transfers tools. Set a reserve floor that cannot be breached without a supermajority vote in this House, Madam Speaker. If the government will do these 4 things, the FNM will support robust disaster financing as they propose. If the government refuses to bring rules, oversight, prevention, and a sustainability plan, then it asks this House to underwrite risk without accountability. Madam Speaker, it's not our plan to do that. To the Bahamian people, you deserve more than press conferences. You deserve drains that work, shelters that hold, and numbers that add up. Prevention is the most conservative fiscal choice we can make. It saves lives. It protects livelihoods. It preserves our national balance sheet. To colleagues opposite, if you want unity, meet the country where it is. Table the regulations. Accept the prevention adjustments that we are raising in this presentation. Bring the financing plan. Stop asking for trust and start earning it. Madam Speaker, the measure before us can be a step forward or it can be a missed chance. The difference is governance. Either way, Madam Speaker, the FNM will be ready to work with anyone serious about resilience, ready to hold the line on transparency and value for money, ready to move the country from reaction to preparation, from promises to performance. Madam Speaker, I give you the assurance, I give the nation the assurance that under my leadership, under the Free National Movement, we will open the books when given an opportunity to govern. People would know how their money was spent, and they will have the assurance that they will know as we continue to spend public resources. Madam Speaker, we have to build a system worthy of our people, not a check without a compass, a plan with rules, a fund with integrity, a government that knows the difference between speech and standard. Madam Speaker, I gave a list that was not exhaustive. There are other things we could have put in the list that show that there's a gap, a void between government's statement and its practice, between its record and what it wishes for us to believe about what they will do in the future. Madam Speaker, there's an additional thing I should mention that could have easily been included on that list. I sat in this House and I listened, Madam Speaker, to members speak about shortcomings during Dorian. Madam Speaker, the F&M is under new management. And we have made it absolutely clear when we thought there were missteps that even us contributed to, Madam Speaker, we were prepared to own. We were prepared to own any mistakes, any shortcomings that came. We are under new management, Madam Speaker. But we listen. Excuse me, Madam Speaker, we listen. We listen to this administration talk about what was not correct during and in the aftermath of Dorian. Madam Speaker, to date, we have still repaired far more homes than this administration, who have been in power, Madam Speaker, for 4 years. Dorian occurred in 2019. We were kicked out of office some 2 years later. And in those 2 years, we repaired more homes than this administration has in 4 years, Madam Speaker. In fact, I laid the report. For those that are asking from their seat to show the report, I laid the report of those homes that were impacted, whether it was with 2,500, 5,000, 7,500, 10,000, and other, Madam Speaker, and other provisions that were made in government to assist those persons. Madam Speaker, one additional element that was mentioned by this administration, the Davis administration over and over, was the tragedy, Madam Speaker, of a number of our people whose remains were in trailers. And it took an inordinate amount of time before a burial occurred, Madam Speaker. This administration, I'm advised, Madam Speaker, after 4 years in office, there are still Dorian victims in trailers in Grand Bahama, Madam Speaker. 4 years later, the very administration that talked about bodies being left in trailers, Madam Speaker, 4 years later, we are being advised, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, when I first heard this, I said, this cannot be the case. And so, Madam Speaker, the government has been selected against the backdrop of the people deciding on who will govern going forward. They are in the chair. There are things they ought to fix, Madam Speaker. And they should answer, is that report correct? Are there still remains of loved ones in trailers? And so, Madam Speaker, as we discuss this resolution, we say the government has to be forward-looking. But if it is to get the public to believe where they hope to take us, we, again, ask persons to look at their record. There is a gap between what they say and what they do. There's one rule for them, and there's rule for others. And so against that backdrop, Madam Speaker, we say to the public, we work for you, not just in our critique of the government proposal, but in the recommendations we put forward on where we ought to go as a country. With those words, Marco City, Madam Speaker, rests.